Welcome back, everybody. My guest today is my very good friend and one of the people I have great admiration for, Derek Maltz. Derek is Senior Vice President of Global Business Growth and Strategy for PenLink, and he's the former acting administrator of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, longtime director of the DEA Special Operations Division, and I have to tell you, one of the most respected figures in America's modern fight against drugs. This is the go-to guy, is what I'm telling you. During his 28 years with the DEA, Derek built a national reputation for his relentless pursuit of the drug cartels. You talk about guys that wake up in the middle of the night with a nightmare. It's these cartel heads thinking about Derek Maltz. He is their worst nightmare. He has really been a thorn in their side, very strategic in combating them, and has a tremendous commitment to public safety. As Director of Special Operations, he coordinated missions across more than 30 U.S. and international agencies, and it was so great at pulling these interagency operations together. And in 2025, as acting DEA administrator, he guided the agency through an unprecedented wave of synthetic opioid threats, fentanyl, carfentanil, and the next generation killers known as nitazines, while strengthening coordination with Customs, Homeland Security, and working with the Mexican authorities. This resulted in the extradition of major cartel leaders. And he's testified before Congress. You'll see him in the media because he tells the story the way it needs to be told. So, Derek, thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Phil. I really appreciate your commitment to this national security and public safety emergency. You've been very dedicated to this from the first time I met you, and I really appreciate, telling America the facts. This synthetic drugs and this crisis has changed America forever. And you notice I'm wearing my American tie because what we're talking about today impacts all Americans. It doesn't matter how rich, how poor, doesn't matter what your, place in America is. It matters that we're all being impacted by these dangerous, lethal synthetic drugs coming out of illicit labs overseas, specifically in China.
You and I get this, but what is it that has people so slow to come around to the fact that this is not something that is on the horizon? This is an emergency right now, today. This isn't something that maybe is going to happen in the future. This is a right now emergency, correct?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Dr. Phil, there's a lot of politics in this country, and too many people are putting politics ahead of public safety and national security. And that's a recipe for a disaster. And that's what's unfolding right now. As law enforcement is working closer together than ever with their Homeland Security task forces, in the whole of government approach, we have American citizens that are not paying attention to details and actually going after law enforcement for trying to keep them safe.
I want to talk about China. You've explained to me, in fact, you were the first one that really broke down for me what the role of China was with the Sinaloa cartel and the precursors to fentanyl. But talk about China's role in these synthetic opioids that are killing Americans. I mean, to me, this is just an absolute attack on American citizens. But talk about how this is happening. What's going on, and what role is China playing in all of this?
Dr. Phil, in my opinion, we've been at chemical war with China for many years. So let me just put it in perspective so your listeners and viewers can understand. This is $207 million. It was seized in a house in Mexico City in 2007. That's many years ago. And it came from a Chinese chemical broker who was providing methamphetamine precursor chemicals to the cartels. So the first point is that the relationships between the cartels and the Chinese chemical brokers didn't start overnight. This is a long history. So in 2007, the seizure was made. In around 2008 and 9, we started seeing synthetic cannabinoids and cathinones, also known as K2 spice and bath salts, inundating our communities and people having major issues. They were getting sick. going to hospitals. Poison control centers were getting calls. Emergency rooms were getting admissions. The point is, it was all coming out of illicit labs in China. Around 2000, let's say 12, 13, we started seeing massive fentanyl analogs coming into America. At first, they were being classified as heroin overdoses because they were mixed with heroin. And because America has never seen this level of, attack on our country, people didn't know any better. So bottom line is, when the autopsies came back, it was illicitly made synthetic fentanyl, opioids, very powerful. But it gets worse because as they started getting pressured over the years, they started getting the Mexican cartels more involved in the distribution process. They would send them at first pure fentanyl. Then over time, it was all the precursors to make fentanyl. They taught the cartels how to make fentanyl, and then they got involved in the money laundering services for the cartels. So they, bottom line, made it much easier for the cartels to make billions of dollars while harming Americans. But as we sit here today, we are way past just fentanyl. We have the nitazines, as you said. We have a whole class of very dangerous synthetic opioids that are actually way more powerful. Some say, 40 times, 100 times more powerful than fentanyl. I'm not a doctor. I can't say that for sure. But we see deaths from these drugs. We talk to families that have lost their kids from these drugs. And it's like nitazine, etinitazine, isonitazine, metanitazine, protonitazine. They're all being shipped from China, just like this madness started way back when, right to, through mail services to people's houses. And they're buying these pill presses from China, and they're making these fake pills. They're making this stuff. And unfortunately, it's getting into the illicit drug supply, and people are dying at record levels.
But these aren't overdoses. These are actually poisonings, right? I mean,
Yes.
this stuff is 100% of the pills that these kids are buying on social media platforms are counterfeit, correct?
Yes, Dr. Phil. And remember, my first show with you, we had Angela Webb, and she made a comment, which I've been quoting her ever since. The American public is being deceived to death. They're thinking they're going to feel better and get high. They're not thinking they're going to die. When we grew up, children made mistakes, and we learned from mistakes. Unfortunately, today, children are dying from mistakes. And because our country is not properly educated on this crisis, our kids are very vulnerable, and the trafficking networks are taking advantage of weaknesses and vulnerabilities.
Is it true that most of this stuff is coming across the border through ports of entry rather than across the deserts and that sort of thing? That it's actually coming through ports of entry because they can only check like 8% of the people that come through legitimate ports of entry. They just don't have the ability to check every person, every vehicle, every bag that comes through a port of entry.
So it's a complex answer, but let me just make sure it's clear. When we talk about cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, the majority is coming through the port of entry, in my opinion, because we have massive tractor trailers, we have cars, we have so much traffic and not enough resources, maybe not enough technology. But let's keep in mind, over the last 4 years, a lot of these brave men and women, patriots that are at the POEs, they're working on babysitting. They were working on administrative duties instead of doing their job to keep Americans safe. That's what they all signed up for. Now, in between the ports of entry, you also have, as you've heard the term, flooding the zone. So the cartels would escort hundreds of people to one Border Patrol checkpoint. Then they would flood the zone with the people, and then they go like a mile down the river or wherever it is and get the people in. They escort them in at a very high price. But when it comes to the new substances that we spoke about, like the nitazines and isonitazines and all that other very powerful stuff, I believe, and I haven't seen intelligence where the cartels are the ones pushing that, into the country. I believe this is a campaign started in the illicit labs in China, and most of that stuff is coming in like it was initially with the fentanyl. But that intelligence is going to come out soon. But I think the trend is, let's sell the stuff right from China to the purchasers in America. And that's kind of what I see. But To answer your question, yeah, it's common sense. When you have hundreds and hundreds of tractor trailers with compartments with produce and everything, they're coming in and they have the drugs secreted in these vehicles. But that doesn't mean it's not coming in between the ports of entries, because we know it is. And it's coming in at the ports. It's coming in on boats. It's coming in on planes. It's coming in cargo. It's like they're overloading us because they're trying to maximize profits.
Maybe it's the conspiracy theorist in me, but is there more to this than just the business aspect? Because I'm wondering, as many Americans as this stuff is highly addictive, it can also be highly lethal, but it's so highly addictive. And I guess the conspiracy theorist in me wants to ask the question, from China's standpoint, this clearly is a multi-billion-dollar business, but are they also addicting America? Is this part of a plan to really get so many Americans addicted to drugs? You see it in San Francisco, you see it in Chicago, you see it in some of the major metropolitan areas. This stuff has such bad side effects, cognitively, liver-wise. It ruins people's health. It ruins their ability to think, motivate, sleep. We got a bunch of zombies stumbling around. It seems like they're trying to addict the American public, sedate the American public, and really undermine the American public.
Dr. Phil, you're right on point. It's a strategic exploitation of U.S. weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The goal is to destabilize and undermine the country. They're destroying the future generation with chemicals made in these illicit labs. It's a very, very effective strategic action, wiping out more Americans than any terrorist organization in the history of this country, and many wars that we've had since the World War II. Like, my brother came back in a body bag out of Afghanistan. And if you added up Afghanistan, Iraq, and all these other wars, it wouldn't come close to the amount of Americans killed with fentanyl. But let me highlight this, Dr. Phil, because this is the latest. This is what I received from families last week. This is a T-shirt of the babies that are dying. These aren't drug users. These are not kids that are out there taking pills. They're walking and crawling in locations and they're dead. And now the families are so desperate, they're sending me T-shirts so we can wear it around. You see that little boy in the back? That's a 1-year-old Dominican boy that went to the daycare center in New York City. And this kid died, and the woman that was running the daycare center, instead of calling 911 when 4 children went down in the daycare center, she called her husband to get the stash of fentanyl out of the trap location that they had in the daycare. But the point is that the Chinese criminal networks have deliberately designed this. And by the way, they also, like I said, with the money laundering, if you don't have the money and you don't have the chemicals, you can't kill our citizens like this. So they're very smart, and shame on America for not connecting the dots many years ago. But guys like you, the first time you heard this story, you immediately understood it, because it's basically common sense, Dr. Phil. As you know, this is not very difficult to understand when you look at the tragedies and the horrendous impact to our country. This is very, very sad. And that's why I'm very passionate, because look, my job now is to give back to America. I had a great career in law enforcement. I'm very proud of it. And the men and women of the DEA and Homeland Security and FBI and everyone else, they're doing a good job. But this problem is so much greater than law enforcement. That's why I'm very happy to see the whole of government with the DOD, and I'm happy to see the intel community all coming together, and the kinetic strikes of 4 boats now off the coast of Venezuela. Hopefully, this is going to start changing the mindset of people. But you know what? What's sad is now all these people coming out of the woodwork saying, like, why are we using kinetic strikes? Well, if Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS was using chemicals to kill our countries and our citizens in our country, what would we do? Would we sit back and let it happen, or we'd go on the offensive? So thank you, Secretary of War, President Trump, and the administration for actually putting Americans first.
It seems to me that we've got to get everybody behind this. And it's if people will acknowledge what's happening here, that China is waging war against America here. This is chemical warfare. Now, clearly, President Trump has closed the border. The border is shut down. So That's a big step in the right direction. These precursors that are getting to the cartels to make the fentanyl, some of these precursors are coming into Canada, some of them are coming into the United States, but they're being manufactured in China. How are they getting into the United States with the border being closed, the southern border being closed?
So there's a lot of ways that they get the substances into the country, Dr. Phil. I mean, they're sending shipments directly into America. They have containers. They have chemicals that are in Canada, for an example, that make its way into America. There's so many ways to get the chemicals here, but they're diverting. It's not just, directly to Mexico, because that's too obvious, right? So they're very smart. They're very clever. They'll use all avenues. They'll send it to other countries in Central America or South America, and it'll make its way to the labs in Mexico. But again, going back to these nitazene class of drugs, which we started seeing coming in around 2019, those are coming in my view, most of them are coming in directly in the mail services from China directly. We have customers in America that are ordering up these chemicals, and then they're shipping them right to their locations. There was a case in South Florida last year. I'm very familiar with this because my buddy was the case agent from DEA, and it was a South Florida man who wasn't a cartel member, was importing protonitazene directly from China into the country and then distributing it. So it was a great case with DEA, IRS, Postal Service, and they exposed this. But there's many more cases like this that are happening. This is something that's evolving now. And once again, Dr. Phil, our lawmakers are too busy worrying about the politics of shutting down America instead of enacting new laws to close some of these loopholes. Like, it's a joke that it took all these years to get the whole Fentanyl Act passed. Like, thank God President Trump finally passed it and then held an event at the White House with the families who greatly appreciated his gesture. But that should have been passed many years ago. It's whack-a-mole. You can't keep up with the production of these different substances, and it's all chemical engineering. It's all strategic. It's all by design. So we have to come up with updated strategies. Otherwise, we're going to continue to chase it. But most importantly, Dr. Phil, I would be remiss to not make this comment. We have to start the robust education systems in the schools, to the parents, to the students. It has to be mandatory, and it has to be updated. We have to do the social media reels. You were nice enough to do a reel with me back in the day in your studio, which I love, and thank you very much. But we need everybody out there that cares about our country, that have a huge following, hundreds of millions of followers, to get out there and do some reels on social media sites. That's where the kids are going to get the message. No disrespect to mainstream media, cable news, podcasts. The kids are not watching this stuff and listening to this. They're watching social media reels all day long. So we got to educate them where they're at. This is not too complicated to understand, but we can't recruit the right celebrities and influencers that have the kids' attention. So this is a big thing that we need, because we're not going to be able to arrest the way out of this. And we also need mental illness services. Of course, these kids are turning to drugs for help, because you can't go get help because it's so damn expensive. There's no oversight over the treatment centers. It's like they take cash from these families who are poor to begin with, many of them, and then the kid doesn't get any help. So when are we going to get some oversight on those treatment centers and get the kids the education that they need? This is a sense of urgency that I have. I'm working with the incoming ONDCP director, who's very, very passionate about this stuff, and we're going to start some education campaigns very soon.
Well, you can count on me for that, and you and I should make new videos constantly to be putting up on all the social media platforms, and I can recruit others to join us in doing that, but we should be reaching out to these kids all the time. I've been doing some research on this, and you are so right about how powerful this stuff is, because using morphine as a base, heroin is 2 to 3 times more potent than morphine. Then fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. Then you get into these nitazenes, and they're 25 times more potent than fentanyl. So we know fentanyl is so powerful, so much more deadly than morphine and heroin. And now we get into these nitazines, and they're 25 times more potent than fentanyl. And they're now getting onto the streets. And then protonitazine is 25 times fentanyl. And then we look at some of these are 1,000 times more potent than morphine, and carfentanil, some of it is 10,000 times morphine. Where are they getting this stuff, Derek? What the hell?
It's all made in the labs. And like I said, these are all considered what we called in DEA new psychoactive substances, NPS drugs. It's a part of the benzimidazoles, which again, I'm not the expert on these chemicals. That's the legitimate class of drugs, opioids. But when you look at the nitazines, that's just another name for all these. But let me go back to something critical. So this is a common sense point. Why is it that you can go on a website in China right now and buy xylazine, which is the horse tranquilizer not made for human consumption? You could buy it for $1 and it causes necrosis of the human tissue. So let's think about that. When DEA last year did an analysis of every one of these fentanyl powdered samples, they determined that there was in over 30% of the powder, it contained xylazine. So Dr. Phil, why the hell would anybody want to put a chemical in your body that's causing necrosis, the rotting of human tissue, causing the zombie effect that we see all over the country? That's because it's a nefarious act to go after our citizens. They're trying to come in under the disguise of drug addiction. So people are like, it's only drug addicts. They could die in the streets. Who cares? And they don't pay attention to it. But this is killing off our future generation. So it's really important for people to understand, like, this stuff, by the way, it didn't happen overnight. In 2020, for an example, right, the DEA had to do an emergency scheduling, temporary order of schedule and place an isonitazine into Schedule 1. From 2019 to 2021, the nitazines killed 52 people in Tennessee alone. In 2020, Senator Cotton had to come introduce a bill that would permanently ban ISO, which is isonitazine, the dangerous synthetic opioid. But who in America paid attention? In 2024, DEA now has issued a class-wide scheduling for these drugs, but it's whack-a-mole. It's only 2 years. And by the way, Attorney General Moody in Florida, she actually had to issue an emergency ruling of 8 deadly synthetic opioids in 2022. The DEA was putting videos out from our Washington division 3 years ago, warning America. So what the hell? Where was CDC? Where was the health department under the previous administration? So now it's catch up, and we're trying to save lives and have to have a sense of urgency right now.
That's the thing that I don't understand is maybe they think people are trying to tell them what they can have and what they can't have. If they understood when you're taking something that the body starts dying, tissue starts dying. Necrosis is what happens to dead bodies. And you're taking a substance that causes tissue in the body to start dying. Like you say, you go into the Tenderloin area of San Francisco, you go into parts of any big city, and you start seeing these people. They look catatonic. You see them; they're bent over at the waist, and they're just standing there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they don't move. This is what's happened. These drugs have gotten into their hands, and they're paralyzed. Cognitively, their brain has just gone offline, and these drugs are eating their body away. You'll find those people in 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks, you'll find them dead in a gutter. And that's what's happening. And like you said, these aren't just homeless people. Anybody that gets their hands on these drugs, if it's a college student that orders it online and they start taking this stuff before it kills you, it's so highly addictive, they'll keep going back for more and more and more. So it's the perfect attack on American society. And we've got to get people to realize that this is the perfect attack on American society.
One thing that's been happening, which drives me crazy, because the media just responds to the story of the day. So like, for an example, recently, the DEA was very concerned about mass amounts of fake pills that contain methamphetamine only, right? And the media came out like this was something new. They've been doing that for years. There were warnings out of DEA New England because what happens is when they mix in the pill presses, they mix the methamphetamine and they're trying to make fake Adderall pills. There's contamination of fentanyl in these pill presses. So there's fentanyl that gets in these pills, and it's very, very pure, addictive substances, the methamphetamine. So it's just a recipe for disaster. And I don't know if you're paying attention to this. I know we're talking about synthetic opioids, but just recently, once again, the DEA in Atlanta reported 1,000 pounds of meth seized, piled up on a table.
Right.
That's the cartels that are taking advantage of the addiction in America and staying away from producing the fentanyl like they once were, because they know that President Trump's going to hold them accountable. They're shipping tons and tons of cocaine around the world because now the cocaine addiction all over the world is very, very high. And the coca production in Colombia, in South America, is off the charts, record levels. So the entrepreneurs of the cartels are taking total advantage. That's why this country has to put more and more pressure on the cartels and, of course, the source countries for the chemicals, not just China, but India as well.
Yeah, India as well. And one of the things that I think people need to understand is you can get Narcan and have it handy, and it may help with some of these new synthetic opioids, and it may not. Sometimes you may have to do it 5, 6 times, and you may be able to save somebody, and you may not. And the damage that's done, if you do save them, is irreversible in some cases. So it's not like it is, not that cocaine and meth are okay, but if you can bring somebody back from the brink with Narcan, that's great. But with some of these new synthetic opioids, Narcan isn't necessarily the silver bullet. You can't bring them back from the brink with that.
2 comments on that, Dr. Phil. Number one is that, yes, Narcan's a miracle drug. It's saving Americans every day. But this country pathetically has no accounting of how many people have been saved from Narcan. And I know we can never get 100% accuracy because people are they're administering it at home. They're not going to report it. But hospitals, emergency services, schools, they should be reporting this, and we should have some type of accounting. But by the way, Narcan is not going to save you from xylazine or medetomidine or some of these other non-synthetic opioids. So that's the other issue with Narcan.
Yeah, it has its limits. That's just not going to get it done. When you talk about xylazine and it causing this necrosis, you found this in 30% of the seized powders in 2024, right? It's showing up more and more. What's the motive for them putting this stuff into these drugs at this point?
So that's the question of the day. If I'm a Chinese Communist Party operative, and I know I could sell this stuff and Americans are going to mix it in with fentanyl, it's kind of a no-brainer because they want to harm our citizens, and it's working very well. If I'm a drug dealer in America, I don't always understand the impacts of xylazine. In some cases, they think it's providing a better high. In some cases, they think it's very addictive. It's not like they're trying to deliberately kill their customers in America. These cartels are trying to maximize their profits, Dr. Phil. But it's just this behind the scenes, devious, nefarious activity going on with the criminals in China. And that's the problem. There's 2 separate motives here, in my view.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily at odds with each other. But even when we're talking about marijuana, you're talking about almost 300 illegal Chinese-run grow operations in the United States that the Chinese are running here, and they use heavy pesticides. And we know this because we've got ER cases where kids are showing up with psychosis, schizophrenia. You do drug work, you find out that what they're smoking or ingesting in some way is not, even if it's in a legal marijuana shop, clearly there are pesticides and all that are not approved, and these are coming from these illegal Chinese grow operations. True?
So it started in the news with the 270 that were reported in the state of Maine alone. But Oklahoma's been ground zero. I know they're doing a much better job. But there's thousands of these Chinese run, marijuana grow operations in America. And unfortunately, They're producing very high THC marijuana. And it's also, like you said, being sprayed with pesticides coming from China. We have no idea what's in those pesticides. Again, we're concerned about pesticides in America causing cancer. What are Chinese pesticides causing? Now, when you talk to emergency room doctors, you see increased amounts of American kids that are being diagnosed with marijuana, schizophrenia, psychosis. You're talking about depression and anxiety going up. There's all types of new reports about the illicit marijuana exposure and impacts to our society. This falls in line with the overall strategic plan of the Chinese criminals because it's an ongoing chemical attack on the country. And they know marijuana in America is not looked upon as like fentanyl or cocaine or meth. So they know that most people are saying, it's okay, it's okay. Well, maybe a regulated marijuana that is a certain THC may be okay in some cases, I guess. But the stuff that these Chinese grow operations are pushing on the streets are deadly, and they're harming our kids. And now it's the vapes, Dr. Phil. You see all these law enforcement arrests that are going on around the country where the vape shops are illegally importing all these vapes. And I have doctors telling me that some of these vape products have an addictive substance that's deliberately put in there so the kids smoke more and more of this. But it's illegally coming from China. And, they use the colors and the smells to attract the kids. In my humble opinion, I can't prove this in court, but watch it unfold. This is an ongoing, another phase of the attack using chemicals, taking advantage of the vulnerable, the kids. The kids think it's okay, smoking a vape. It's not a cigarette. I'm not going to die. I'm not taking drugs. Mommy said, don't take drugs, but I could smoke a vape. And now their inside is getting impacted.
Well, I've done story after story of these kids that are vaping that have major respiratory issues, have lung issues, wind up in the hospital on respirators. It is very dangerous because there's no control about what's going into these vapes. They don't know what they're ingesting, what's impacting their lungs. When we talk about the money that's involved with whether it's the precursor materials, it's the finished product that's getting into America, what's the order of magnitude that we're talking about with regard to synthetic opioids?
Well, billions of dollars have been made by the cartels. Okay, there's no one that has an exact figure, but we know with the migrant trafficking, there's been studies, the human trafficking disaster that went on the last 4 years. They made billions of dollars, and now they've lost a lot of that revenue, most of it, right? Because the border's shut down. So, of course, they're trying to make up for lost revenue. So they're pumping out a lot more, in my opinion, manufacturing a lot more methamphetamine, more cocaine. They're involved with the synthetic business for, several years now. They have efficient money laundering systems in place using the Chinese criminals. They use encrypted apps. They use Chinese banking apps. And on top of that, the Chinese are getting all their cash in America to buy property, land, farmland. And you know what's ironic here, Dr. Phil? Our previous FBI director told the world repeatedly that China is the biggest national security threat to our country. So the obvious question for anybody is then why are we letting them in at record levels over the last 4 years? Who are they? What are they doing here? And why would the U.S. government facilitate their entry, knowing that they're the largest national security threat, trying to penetrate our financial systems, our water systems, our, you name it, banking systems. So I have a major issue with that. That's just contradicts public safety, national security. That has to remain the top priority. And unfortunately, President Trump now is trying to put it all back in the box. And there's so many different areas that he has to focus on. But right now, I see a lot of progress. I see a lot of positive stuff happening, but it's just overwhelming. And, I know how hard the law enforcement, intelligence community, and DOD is working. And it's very difficult. I was in there, so I participated in the meetings, and I know what they're doing, and I anticipate a lot more positive results. But again, if we don't educate these kids and their parents on this is something that we've never seen in the history of this country, then it's just going to continue because the bad guys are going to produce substances to sell and to, take advantage of the weak and vulnerable using social media to get it out there and advertise it. So we have our hands full in this area, Dr. Phil.
The president has labeled these cartels as terrorist organizations in order to mobilize more resources to go after them, military and intelligence, otherwise. Clearly, the pinch is on these cartels. Their money is getting pinched, their market is getting pinched down. What's their reaction likely to be? What are they going to do when the money dries up, the market dries up? What's going to happen when he continues to keep the pressure on them by labeling them as terrorist groups?
Well, for one, I applaud the president and the administration finally stepping up. We tried to get that to happen during Trump 1, and the bureaucrats convinced them it was a bad move, and we lost a lot of people since that time. But anyway, the cartels are very resilient. They adapt quickly, and they're taking advantage of the markets around the world right now with cocaine and methamphetamine. In my view, they definitely have eased the production of fentanyl in the labs in Mexico, which is a good thing, save some lives. But they're not going to stop until they're completely decimated. So I'm hopeful that the Mexican government, President Sheinbaum, has been very cooperative from my point of view. I was at Dulles Airport when these seven of these high-level operatives landed. They were removed along with, 22 others. So we had a total of 29 that came in February. They had an additional 27 that came in last month. 55 high-level operatives have been removed from Mexico. But now we need to go after the Menchos of the world in Mexico, and we need to decimate their ability to produce these poisonous substances. And so the sense of urgency has to be, full speed ahead. And they're going to continue. They definitely are not happy that they had to change their methods of operations since they lost billions of dollars in revenue from the migrant smuggling. President Trump put his words into action along with the high-level, administration officials, and that's what the public voted for in November. They want our country to be safe and secure. That's number one. So I'm very hopeful that we're on the cartels. We have warships off the coast of Venezuela, but it's also these corrupt regimes like the Venezuela, corrupt machine. That's been going on. We've been chasing them, Dr. Phil, for many years. When I was at the head of the SOD, we started initiative after initiative to attack the command and control in Venezuela because they aligned themselves with Hezbollah. We uncovered Project Cassandra operation, the largest ever infiltration into Hezbollah's money laundering and drug trafficking operation with the cartels in Mexico. And a lot of the people in the public had no idea. So that's quite alarming, because how many Hezbollah members came into America through the last 4 years with the wide open border? We know the cartels were paid like big bucks, up to like $50,000, I've been told, to get the high value targets into the country. Well, who are these high value targets? Now we're hearing NCTC warnings about Al-Qaeda operatives, and none of this stuff is going to surprise me. And then the American public's going to say, how did we let that happen? Well, you let the border wide open for 4 years. It's just common sense. So yeah, there's a lot of issues, I know, but public has to wake up because it's impacting all of us.
Yeah, and it seems to me that we know that there have been a lot of Chinese, particularly military-age males, that have come across the border, particularly across the Southern California border. And then we find out that we have all of these grow operations here, that we have, all of these drugs being manufactured. They may be being manufactured in the United States, but you've got to wonder what they're all doing here. Maybe they're just waiting to do something much bigger than what's happened so far. But we know that there are illicit operations going on in terms of trafficking and drugs. Who's doing that? Well, all of these Chinese, particularly military-aged men, have been let into the country during the Biden administration. Who else would be doing the things that we're talking about right now, these grow operations and other things? So clearly there's manpower here to do this. And one of the things that people don't understand is that the cartels are often hiring U.S. citizens to smuggle this stuff through the ports of entry as well. I think it was Troy Miller recently on 60 Minutes, the CBP commissioner, was talking about 2/3 of people arrested for smuggling fentanyl are American citizens. So they're paying big bucks to American citizens to smuggle these drugs across the border.
Right. And they're using U.S. social media companies to recruit these kids because that's where they're at. So that's why we got to train and educate all these kids and all these younger, generation folks about what's happening. And I don't know why we don't have a campaign. Although I greatly appreciate President Trump's fentanyl-free ads that we're seeing, the PSAs. They're very impactful, and thank you so much for producing them. But we need to have the same type of passion and aggression to get this stuff on the social media. And when people when people question me about declaring the cartels as terrorists, that's too aggressive, they say in some cases. I only go back to this, Dr. Phil, a visual paints 1,000 words, right? These babies are not around anymore. So what do we say about that? Do we continue to allow it to happen, or do we stand up for our citizens? Because that's the number one job of the government. And right now, that's what's happening. So I'm looking forward to more and more results.
Let me ask you so people understand the gravity of what we're talking about. If you have a lab that is cranking out pills, say just south of the border, how much can one pill mill turn out if they're stamping pills out? How many pills can they turn out in a month?
There was a pill machine seized in East Haven, Connecticut, part of a DEA postal investigation. The one machine allegedly was able to produce 100,000 fake pills per hour. In my experience, many of these machines are producing anywhere from 5 to maybe 7,500 an hour. So do the math. I mean, I don't have the calculator right now. If you just every day look at how many pills you could produce. And really, there's an unlimited supply of synthetic powder because it's very cheap to make. And so there's labs. You don't need like big warehouses to get these synthetic opioid labs. You could get a table. I actually saw when I was the acting administrator, they did a demonstration. One table with a couple containers could make like a kilo of fentanyl. So it's not very intense as far as like the volume, that the space that you need. And so God knows how many of the pills are already here. President Trump, in my view, inherited a country loaded with deadly pills and deadly powder. So now we just got to hope for the best and clean it up and hold people accountable and send a strong message. I mean, look, in El Salvador, I always go back to President Bukele because he puts the violent MS-13s in these terror prisons. And the crime rate in El Salvador has gone way down. It's like one of the safest countries in the world. So putting them in prison and holding them accountable is going to have a deterrent effect. But, the American public, you get what you vote for. And if they want mass chaos and they want dead Americans and babies going into morgues, that's their choice. But it's disgusting. And we'll continue to fight every way we can.
What you're saying is they're mixing this stuff up. They can make this stuff up in a bathtub. These aren't big brains mixing this stuff up. These guys, half of them may be illiterate.
They're not bringing in like FDA chemists to mix the powder in these pill presses, right?
Exactly. So you have no idea what you're getting. They're dumping stuff in there while they're talking, watching something on TV. They're mixing this stuff with a boat oar. You have no idea what you're getting.
And by the way, just to bring you up to speed, like a lot of these pharmaceutical sites on the internet, they appear to be real. The pill mills in New York, as an example, are fulfilling the orders that people are making. So let's say you're an elderly guy, you live alone, and you need some type of prescription. You go online to this pharmacy, it's going to deliver to your house. It could be being fulfilled in one of these pill mills in New York City, and you could die, and it happens. We had one disaster a couple of summers ago that there were 18 people that were poisoned in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'll never forget it, because the ages of the people on that incident were 56 to 70. So there's no doubt in my mind that there's people that couldn't afford prescriptions, that they went online, whatever. So anyway, it is very dangerous to all, aspects of our society.
Yeah, they're just trying to save money, so they go find some, and here it is advertised. And even these kids that think, okay, I'm going to take some Ritalin to stay awake during finals, So they order a Ritalin pill. It doesn't have one molecule of Ritalin in it. They're not getting anything that they think they're getting.
It's like Adderall. Remember the Ohio State kids, the pre-med student with a friend? They were in the dorm room in May of, I think, 2022. Both found dead. The chancellor said, "This is unbelievable. How can this happen?" Because you're not paying attention to the trends that are coming out. And the last administration wasn't telling the public about these dangerous trends.
They ought to have flyers, information in every dorm room, in every classroom. This should be something that is just papered wall to wall, because you're saving lives every time you do.
Yeah, those two college students thought they were taking Adderall to do better on the test so they could graduate and become doctors one day. And unfortunately, it was tainted fake pills that didn't contain, like you said, one dot of Adderall.
And that's tragic. Well, let me tell you, we've got to keep beating this drum. We've got to keep telling this story. You are the ultimate spokesperson on this. We just need to keep building this army and making sure we're out there beating the drum and saving these kids. Because if they get it, if they understand the risk involved, then they won't do this. We just need to make sure we get the message to them.
Exactly. And I really appreciate it, Dr. Phil, because I'll never forget my first visit with you after our podcast, and you've been a man of your word. You went on Joe Rogan's show and you illuminated the message there with his huge audience. And I'll never forget that, because you even said yourself, like, there's a lot of stuff that you learn, and I really appreciate it. I wish more American media professionals would do the same thing. Now it's just like the story of the day, and that's not working. So we need to be more proactive with the media.
Well, let's stay in touch. You keep me abreast of anything and everything that pops up on the radar, and we'll make sure and get it out and get the message out and keep people aware of what's going on. We know that we're doing good work here by getting this message out. So we're going to make sure this gets broad distribution, and you and I will talk soon, my friend. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Dr. Phil, and hope to see you soon.
All right. Be well. We'll talk soon.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. So long.